In these rare 1945 clips, we see P-38 Lightning strafing ground targets with their armaments. The fighter's 50 caliber target strike flashes are characteristics of either an incendiary or, more likely, armor-piercing incendiary bullet hits. The 50 caliber API bullet was ideally suited for both air-to-air combat and ground strafing. The P-38 strike grouping is also tight, with low bullet hit dispersion. The intent of this video is to compare the bullet dispersion of wing-mounted guns like the P-47 to the P-38 Lightnings armed with fuselage-mounted guns. At the end of the video, we will review footage showing clear-cut bullet strike pattern differences between wing and nose-mounted guns. As discussed in the channel's previous video, U.S. fighters' effective range was set between 450 and 1,200 feet. This range was based on many ballistic factors, as shown on this table from a 1945 Army Air Forces Training Command document titled Fighter Gunnery. If the fighter fired on the target within ranges between 450 and 1,200 feet, these bullet ballistic effects were small enough to ignore. A key factor to consider is the fighter's target size. An aerial target size equates to an area roughly 6 to 8 feet in diameter, as defined on this page from a May 1945 Air Force No. 44 manual titled Fighter Gunnery Rocket Firing Dive Bombing. A 6 to 8 foot diameter vital zone is shaded here, which includes the pilot, engine, oil, and fuel tanks. This implies the fighter's multiple gun converging strike pattern should roughly occupy a 6 to 8 foot diameter circle when within the effective range. When bullets leave the muzzle of a machine gun barrel, they do not follow the exact path of the preceding bullet. The bullet's cone of dispersion is due to differences in the mass properties of the bullet and cartridge propellant and vibrations of the gun and plane. A 50 caliber bullet's cone of dispersion is defined as 4 mils, where 75% of the bullet strikes are bound by a 4 mil cone of dispersion. A mil is short for milliradians. 1 milliradian equates to an angle of 0.0573 degrees. 75% of the bullets fired from the single 50 caliber P-47 gun will be bound by this 4 mil or 0.225 degree cone of dispersion. The solid line is the barrel's line of sight. 75% of the bullets will strike within a 1.8 foot diameter circle at a range of 450 feet, 4.8 feet at 1,200 foot range, and 7.2 feet at an 1,800 foot range. The fighter's 8 guns line of sight will need to be towed in and slightly elevated to harmonize the desired strike pattern with the gun sight at an effective range between 450 and 1,200 feet. The P-47's 8 guns will be adjusted such that they provide the uniform lethal coverage of the target's vital zone over an effective range of 450 to 1,200 feet. The gun sight will be roughly aligned to the strike pattern center of lethal hits over the effective range. The pilot does not need to account for the bullet drop due to gravity when firing within the effective range. Since the target area is roughly an 8-foot circle, the strike pattern should be around the size of an 8-foot circle. This image illustrates the guns to gun sight pattern harmonization of a P-47. The 8 wing guns are located here. The gun sight is represented by this solid blue line. The barrels are harmonized to converge with the gun sight at distances around 910, 980, 1020, and 1180 feet. The 4 mil cone of dispersion boundaries are these dotted lines. These graphs show the P-47's 8-gun overlapping 75% 4 mil bullet strike patterns. The gun sight is represented by the crosshairs. Each square is a 1 foot by 1 foot area. Each circle is an area where 75% of the bullets will strike from one of the P-47's 8 machine guns. At a 1,200-foot distance, the strike area is a circle with a diameter of 4.8 feet. 1,800-foot distance, the strike diameter increases to 7.2 feet, and at 2,400-foot distance, a 9.2-foot diameter circle. Channel observations of the P-47's dispersion patterns. As the target distance increases, the bullet strike pattern diverges into 2 large strike areas, shifting down due to gravity and no bullet convergence at the gun sight's reticle. An 8-foot diameter target would not likely sustain lethal hits if fired upon over an 1,800-foot range. The target would be outside the P-47's harmonization sweet spot concentrated bullet strike effective zone. At a 1,200-foot range, this area is roughly a triangle 9 feet high with a 9-foot base. At a 1,500-foot distance, the same number of bullets will strike over a much larger area. The P-38's bullet trajectories are shown on this page. The gun sight's line of sight is represented by this solid blue line. The guns are firing from this location. This image from a 1945 Army Air Forces manual titled Pilot Training Manual for the P-38 shows the nose location of the four 50 caliber machine guns and the single 20mm autocannon. The cannon and four machine guns are parallel with one another, no crisscrossing of trajectories, although the barrels are tipped up to account for the bullet and cannon projectiles drop due to gravity. The 4 mil dispersion cone is bounded by these lines. This includes a 20mm autocannon. There's a small deviation of the cannon's projectile from the machine gun bullets at these farther distances, as represented by this slightly thicker line highlighted. The 20mm projectile's trajectory seems to match well with the 50 caliber bullet's trajectory. The 4 mil 75% strike patterns are represented by these graphs. The gun sight pip is a symbol. Observation of the P-38's dispersion charts. There's a slight vertical strike pattern shift such that the centroid of the strike pattern stays within a reasonable distance from the gun sight's pip or predicted impact point. The 75% mill strike areas are concentrated, dense, and tight, even out to 2,000 feet. At a 2,000-foot distance, the strike area is roughly an ellipse, 9 feet by 10 feet. More importantly, the pip is roughly centered within the bullet strike zone, both vertically and horizontally, and there's no blind strike areas. The Army Air Force's Proving Ground evaluated and provided results of a study comparing the P-38's performance to other current generation fighters, as shown in this 1943 document titled Final Report on Tactical Suitability of the P-38 F-Type Airplane. The results of the armaments evaluation included nose-mounted guns aligned close to the gun sight is a superior gun armament to any U.S. fighter. Fire is more accurate at longer ranges, and impact center pattern will remain virtually the same for all practical ranges for the four 50 caliber guns. With all guns located in the plane's nose, this eliminates crisscrossing bullet trajectories. P-38s have an effective straight-ahead accurate fire pattern for ranges out to 600 yards, which make it ideal for strafing. This page evaluates the P-38's performance in the European theater from a 1945 Army Air Forces board document titled 8th Air Force Tactical Development. P-38s flew best at lower or medium altitudes, however, performance deteriorated at higher altitudes. A disadvantage of the P-38s, like the P-51s, was the vulnerability of the engine's liquid cooling system if damaged, although P-38s could fly on one engine. Let's take a look at more combat footage comparing the P-38's concentrated firepower to fighters with wing-mounted guns. Notice a concentrated 50 caliber API bullet strikes on target. Let's look at the last attack in slow motion. You can clearly see Lieutenant Morris guide the P-38's bullet impact points, raking the train with concentrated strikes. Let's now compare the dispersion pattern of the 6-gun wing-mounted P-51 Mustang. The bullet strikes seem well dispersed at the target or at ground contact. More P-38 train strafing and an FW-190 air-to-air engagement shoot-down. In summary, nose-mounted guns did not need to be crisscrossed to optimize the bullet strike concentrations. This allowed for more accurate bullet strikes at longer ranges. Army Air Force's evaluation concluded this fighter armaments arrangement was superior to wing-mounted guns. If you've enjoyed this P-38 versus wing-mounted gun deep dive review, please consider liking, commenting, and/or subscribing to the channel World War II U.S. Bombers.